Hello, everyone, and welcome to Patriot Underground. Today is August 3rd, 2021. Thank you so much for joining me to discover the truth beneath the surface. So, tonight I'm actually going to be providing an Intel update analysis from the road. I'm on vacation yet again with my family, and I had a few minutes here to be able to get away and hopefully provide you folks with some high quality analysis. So, thank you again for joining me. So, what I wanted to do before I really jump into all of the intel and talking about what's going on in the world, I just wanted to address really quickly the audio quality on my Gene Decode interview, the third interview. Now, I didn't realize as I was interviewing Gene that there was such a disparity, as such a difference between my microphone volume and his. I could hear him okay, but I have pretty good hearing. But then somehow when I recorded the interview, the audio differences were just really, really extreme. So folks had to really jack up the volume to hear Gene. And then when I would respond, I would be like blasting out their eardrum. So I wanted to apologize to the audience for that. I'm sure that basically everybody who's going to listen to this podcast tonight, I'm sure, unless you're a new listener, you've probably listened to the Gene Decode interview. So once again, I do apologize. As you know, I'm going to be having Gene on at the end of the month. So I'm going to be sure to take a moment to make sure we have our microphones synced up so that doesn't happen again. So thank you for putting up with that. Despite all that, I've had really, really great feedback, excuse me, so far on that interview. So I'm really excited about every opportunity that I have to talk to Gene Decode is just really a blessing in terms of me learning things personally and also being able to share that intelligence and all that knowledge and be able to analyze it with the audience. It's just an amazing blessing. So tonight I was just going to start by talking about the beginning of Trump's presidency and where we are today as opposed to when he first came into office. Now, there are a lot of folks who because we don't know the exact history of how things went down when Trump first came into office, there are different theories about how the alliance approached this entire plan, this entire Q plan from the beginning. And some people are arguing that the plan has evolved and changed pretty dramatically since Trump took office because the swamp turned out to be far worse than he ever imagined. And that initially, when Trump came into office, some people are saying that he really did want to take the legal route. He really did believe that there was some avenue that he could find, some legal avenue, some institution that wasn't corrupted, that wasn't a part of the swamp, that would be able to lay the groundwork for us to get justice in this country. But he realized that the system was far too gone and that using the rule of law to expose the swamp was no longer an option. And that's why the military was the only way forward. Now, some folks are saying that the military always had to be the solution. It was always the only way forward. And others are saying, well, at one point in time, the alliance may have been looking at other options, other possibilities. Now, I happen to think that the military always had to be the only option. And I happen to believe that Trump did all of this. He appeared to try to use the rule of law to expose the swamp in order to really not just expose the swamp because he knew it wouldn't work. What he was really trying to expose was the corruption of the establishment, of the system. That's what he was really trying to get the public to understand. And the public, of course, did. And I believe when the Q drops were telling us that the military was the only way, they knew this a long time ago. And that what we've been witnessing is a pantomime, as I've been saying, to expose the truth about this corrupt system. But the entire swamp needed really to be unleashed on the public. We needed to be inundated on the public so that people would experience the horrific plans of the cabal firsthand. Because again, trying to tell somebody something doesn't usually work. You have to show them. You have to find a way for people to experience something for themselves in order for them to really integrate it into their psyche, to really accept the truth behind it, because simply telling doesn't work. And I believe that Trump always knew that, and the alliance always knew that. And this pantomime was designed to do exactly that. And this degeneration of society was planned by the White Hats. And the reason that it was so effective, in large part, is because the cabal thought that Trump was going to hit them head on. They never expected that Trump was going to be so skilled at the art of war, because he knew that in order to go after the deep, deep levels of corruption, that not only was it going to take a long time, and not only was it going to be a very frustrating process and experience, but most importantly, he knew that in order for this to be successful, he would need the backing of the American people. He knew that. He was always keeping the enemy off guard, because they really can never predict what he's going to do. They never know what his next move is going to be. And not only that, they don't understand his tactics in the first place. But Trump knew that the vast majority of people would need to back the military stepping in and taking control, whether it's them officially being in control or not, only on the surface. I mean, regardless of what the real truth of the command structure is, whether it's real martial law, because a lot of folks are saying, well, he signed the Insurrection Act, so it wouldn't be martial law. I happen to believe that Trump did not sign the Insurrection Act because of the reasons that I've already gone over. I think it was a couple podcasts ago where I talked about this. Because he knew that if he signed the Insurrection Act, even though it was the right thing to do, that it was going to lead the country irreversibly down a path towards civil war. And as I've also been stressing virtually this entire time, is that the entire plan was to avoid American bloodshed, further American bloodshed, and certainly Americans slaughtering other Americans and letting the cabal win in that sense, because that's what they've always wanted. The cabal's escape route is always pitting one group against another and causing war and withdrawing into the shadows and then posing as the savior. And Trump knew all this. So he knew that the vast majority of the people, and by the way, we're talking about a deeply controlled and manipulated and mind controlled population. Despite all that, he knew the people needed to be on his side overwhelmingly, as well as the military. I heard X22 refer to it as somewhat of that Trump knew that he needed the military and the people to create a counterinsurgency against the deep state infiltration of virtually every part of our society. And I completely agree with that. That Trump has been setting up a counterinsurgency to stand against the insurgency of the cabal. That makes a lot of sense. And now that he's out of office, ironically enough, Trump has even more power and more leverage than he ever did. And he continues to prove himself right day after day after day after day. All the things that the mainstream media attacked him for and branded him a liar about and so on and so forth, every single thing that Trump says, if you're paying attention and you're honest and you have integrity and you do your research, sooner or later, turns out to be true. And ultimately, I think that's what the people want. The people want the truth. I mean, a vast majority of the people, forget about being Democrat, forget about being Republican, forget about, when you remove all the deep levels of mind control and manipulation, despite their differences, a vast majority of people want the same thing, is they want to know the truth about what's going on. And they want leaders who are going to tell them the truth. And Trump has done exactly that. And so even people who hate Trump or hated Trump are starting to have to admit that everything that he said was true, whether it was about COVID. I mean, you pick the issue. The election, the deep state, the Democrats, what their real agenda was, everything that Trump, the Russia hoax, it just goes on and on and on. Everything that Trump said and everything the man says turns out to be true. Now, am I trying to exalt him into a godlike status? No. But I'm pointing out the fact is he is an honest person. He is an honest man. He knows how to keep the enemy off guard, but he tells you the truth. And the American people, I believe, are coming to appreciate that. With every statement he exposes the MSM because they attack his truth, and then they're exposed as the liars again and again and again to the American people. And I believe that this is a tactic by Trump and the alliance to win the hearts and minds of the people. And that Trump always believed, as we all do, that the truth would set us free in due time. But like the saying goes, the truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off. And that, of course, is why so many of us are feeling exactly that way. But really, over time, that's what people appreciate and admire, is someone who tells the truth and is honest. And Trump is playing the long game. He always has been. I've talked at great length about how this has always been about way more than an election, way more than even just the United States. I mean, that's, of course, Trump's top priority, but this goes far beyond nation states. This goes to the very core of our survival as a species. And Trump is playing the long game. He knows that it's all about credibility, and that credibility is something that is built over time. I've heard other people say similar things about, that's what the deep state does, is they dangle, like propaganda is very shiny, it's very dangly, it catches people's attention, but the truth takes a while for it to come out. And Trump always understood this, so he realized that what he needed to do was he needed to plant seeds inside the minds of even the people who were his bitterest enemies. Because that really, were confused, that if they knew the truth, they would understand that Trump was actually a hero and was not their enemy, was their greatest ally. But he understood, in order to get through to these people, he had to break through the conditioning of the mainstream media. He had to break through the conditioning of the establishment, this yoke of mind control that we've all been under for such a long time. And in order to do that, he needed to be very, very patient and play the long game. And when you look at even the mainstream media polls, which I believe are all part of the pantomime, by the way, and I also believe that the alliance has taken control of certain elements of the mainstream media, but you can see even in the mainstream media polls that they're putting out about their own credibility, you see the numbers plummeting. And I've gone over examples of that. So this entire degeneration, devolution, it's playing out for the public to see. And of course, the Q drops gave us little bits and pieces. And I think this is also something I heard on X22 is talking about how the Q drops, metaphorically in a sense, were all these different puzzle pieces. And the more time goes by, and the deeper we get, the closer we get into this quickening, more and more of the puzzle pieces are now starting to fit. There are still some missing. There are still some areas where the picture is not entirely clear, of course. But with every passing day, it gets more and more clear. And I think that's really, really exciting. And we see that amidst all these crises, Trump, like I said, he's continually proven right. And the border crisis, of course, is a major issue, a major example of that. You've got thousands of people. There are these videos coming out, thousands of people being detained under a bridge in Texas. And despite the fact that we're supposedly in a pandemic situation, even though we're not, and we've got this Delta variant, even though we don't, but supposedly we have this going on, and they're continuing the cabal, the establishment, the mainstream media, they're continuing to expose their agenda and to expose their own deception. I mean, why would you let if you had a pandemic, a pandemic going on, why in the world would you let unvetted people into the country? I mean, under these conditions, if they actually existed, which most people believe they do, I mean, this is causing a lot of people to wake up as they experience the hypocrisy of the Democratic Party, who is all the while rejecting real freedom seekers like the Cuban people who want to assimilate into American culture and hate communism and want to be free. Of course, they're not welcome here. And it's amazing that there are still so many Americans out there who can find ways to rationalize this. And then you've got the TSA putting Americans through all these pat downs, and we've got to prove who we are 6 ways from Sunday, and we've got to jump through all these hoops and deal with being groped and so on and so forth, forcing us to subject ourselves to these violations of our basic rights and our basic human dignity and even common sense. And meanwhile, you've got all these illegals coming into the country who aren't even vetted, and they don't have to do any of these things. The American citizens are being targeted, and people are noticing. Of course, this is always the plan of the cabal. The American people are the enemy, and what they're doing is attacking us through asymmetrical warfare, as we've discussed. But we see more and more people pushing back. I mean, there have been protests all over the world. The military has been called in to keep people locked down in many different areas of the world because free people, and by the way, freedom is a state of mind in many ways. These people believe that they're free. They know that they're free. They understand that they were born free. And all over the world, they're rising up against this tyranny. And unfortunately, we haven't seen enough of this yet in the United States, although I do believe, as Gene pointed out the other day, well, it was more than the other day, it's a couple of weeks ago now. But as Gene pointed out, he believes that we've hit that critical mass, whether it's, whatever percentage it is. We could throw around numbers all day long. Whatever that number is, he believes that whatever it is, we've hit it, that critical mass. And I tend to agree. When I look around and I see who's awake, and I see the people, not even just in terms of, individual people, but just in terms of the mindset and the type of person, the type of person that's awake right now and the type of person that's still asleep. And until things get really, really, really extreme, as we know they're going to, these people aren't going to be reached. But in the coming days and the coming weeks, I mean, gosh, it could be any second. We've got some major, major, major developments, some major shoes just waiting to drop. Now, I've talked a lot about Ghislane Maxwell and how significant her case is. And we're hearing that, she, through her lawyers, is trying to drag her feet, unsealing these documents that the judge ordered as she prepares a defense. But it's only a delay tactic. And so when this stuff comes out, it's going to implicate thousands of high-profile people and celebrities, leaders all over the world, royals, athletes, you name it. So you can expect, as I do, and I could be wrong about a timeline. Again, this is just my gut feeling, but you can expect a blackout and riots probably sometime this month or maybe in the early fall, depending upon the timing and how this information rolls out. But the Patriots predicted this. That's the thing that people need to understand. They need to remember. And yes, there are certain states that are no longer complying with this federal tyranny. There are definitely states who are organizing against the federal government, not in a military sense, of course, at this point, but they're organizing against this tyranny. But the alliance, the Patriots, they predicted all this. And I believe it's unfolding more or less exactly how they imagined it would. There were certain things that happened along the way that changed the timelines. And we've discussed that. Gene's discussed that. But in essence, I think we're on course. And all the insiders, the people that I'm listening to and having discussions with, they're in agreement. And we're going to talk more, I'm going to give you more examples of some more evidence to support that in a minute. But we're at war right now. And just like during the Revolutionary War, during the Civil War, during other conflicts, families are divided. And it's a really, really sad thing. I talk to a lot of my listeners about this, and they experience this deep division within their family because people realize that people who are awake right now, they realize that this is not a time to sit back and to keep quiet and to just go along or go with the flow or go along to get along. And that means that they're getting more vocal, which is exactly what needs to happen, and more aggressive and more in people's face and more pushing back and more generating that and rousing that fighting spirit. That's exactly where we need to be. But of course, that's going to generate a reaction from our families because they're still under the mind control. They don't understand. We're witnessing a pantomime, but they think it's reality. But more and more people, if you're looking at the data, if you're looking at the statistics and the polls, more and more people are seeing that our supposed leaders, they don't live by the same rules that they impose upon us. And of course, there's the example of Obama having supposedly having this big party with 475 guests or something like that on Martha's Vineyard on his huge mansion on the ocean, which makes perfect sense to buy if you believe in global warming, of course, or climate change, as they call it. And that's just the latest, I think, in my view, the latest example in this pantomime of their glaring hypocrisy, putting it out there for people to see. If we really have this pandemic going on, why are they having this massive get together? While at the same time pushing these lockdowns on us and telling us to mask up again. And trying to force us to get the you know what. But their ultimate goal has always been mandatory stuff in your arm. And you can see the rollout. You get the CDC saying that they're looking into making it mandatory. You got the DOJ claiming that forcing it is legal when it's a clear Nuremberg Code violation and a war crime. You've got the WHO reversing all of their previous reversals. They're doing reversals on mask mandates, quote unquote guidance. They're changing the definition of herd immunity to no longer include immunity developed through previous infection. Translation, herd immunity can now only be achieved by sticking something in everybody's arm and not by developing natural antibodies through surviving an infection. I mean, this is what they do. They tighten and loosen the noose very strategically. It's a slow boil game where the object is to never let the frogs know they're in a pot until it's too late. But the cabal didn't really like the Pepe memes because it was a clear signal to them that the frogs were awake and had already gotten wise. But we see the Biden administration lobbying private companies successfully. Major corporations, of course, there's no division, as we know. This is fascism. There's no division. The cabal is not only the establishment government and the deep state, but they're also the corporations. I've talked about this many different times. The corporations are their uniforms. It's their disguise. And so they're lobbying, the private companies successfully to make the thing that goes in your arm mandatory. I mean, this is really, really heating up quick. You've got major companies like Walmart and Google and Disney and Facebook and Twitter and Goldman Sachs, and on and on and on, in virtually all different categories of corporation in lockstep here. And mark my words, these people will hang for this, just like they did after World War II. Gene had really broken it down in detail on my show about how what they're pushing is a direct violation of every single tenet of the Nuremberg Code regarding experiment on human subjects. And we're talking about the death penalty. And so we're seeing the cabal in desperation. They're attempting to divide the people who've gotten the thing in your arm and against the people who haven't and refuse to. And that's really accelerating at this point. You've got Cuomo out there telling companies for both patronage and hiring purposes to only accept the people who've gotten it. We see the MSM demonization of the people who haven't gotten it in the same way the Nazis targeted Jews for alienation from society. Medical apartheid. That's what X-22 called it, and I agree. That's exactly what this is. I mean, Cuomo is telling businesses out there, don't let people in unless they've had it. Think about that. And then, of course, on the surface, again, all this is on the surface. All this is the pantomime. But you got Fauci out there saying that as far as COVID goes, there are no individual rights. I mean, what an absolutely outrageous statement. I mean, this man should be arrested and thrown in jail immediately. I mean, the things that he's saying and putting out there are so patently un-American. It's unbelievable. We don't have any individual rights anymore. Why? Because you say so? Because you say there's a pandemic that you created? That you funded in the lab? And now we don't have any rights anymore? And you think people are going to accept this? A majority of people? No. And they're not. We know we're born with these rights. We're not going to let Fauci tell us what our rights are and aren't. I mean, is that what it's going to come down to at the end of the day? Who gets to tell you what your God-given rights are, what your individual liberties are, other than God? Nobody. And people are rediscovering that. But their agenda needs to be defied by the people en masse. I mean, we have to start rejecting mask mandates and certainly any forced attempts at putting it in your arm from any institution, whether it be public or private. And I've stated before that the Great Awakening will be a realization that our rights are sacrosanct and therefore can never be violated by any institution or organization, period, under any circumstances. And once enough people say no and refuse, then it's over for the cabal. Now, people can still claim, as far as I know, religious exemption, and should. But they also need to rouse their fighting spirit to fight a potential legal battle, if necessary. A lot of people are hesitant to get involved in this way, and I understand that. They don't want to stick their heads out. They don't want to get involved. They're humble people. They don't see themselves as leaders or fighters or so forth. But folks need to understand that the fight will only get physical if people don't stand up now. Because the more anyone acquiesces to these scumbags, the worse it gets. We fight in a courtroom and on the digital battlefield to avoid having to go the route of a physical war. So what we need is mass civil disobedience right now. And we need to see it grow and grow and grow. And we're seeing it. People get it. But I mean, as far as the thing that goes in your arm, people should go to the American Frontline Doctors website and get prepared to put their institutions on notice. Should they go with this mandate? I know I am. I mean, if they want to have this type of fight, people need to get ready, because this is what we may have to face. This is part of the meat grinder that we may have to go through. How far it's going to go, I think, depends on how much we put up with. Personally, I think the minute that the American people show up on the streets in mass and say no more, I think the movie will be over, and I think things will get better, or at least they'll start to. But the longer that we sit back and the longer we wait and see what's going to happen and hope that someone else is going to step forward and do our fighting for us, well, the more we're going to have to suffer collectively, I think. I mean, you got to let them know. Whether it's your work or whatever institution, you got to let them know that they're committing and they're being complicit with war crimes. That these are violations of the Nuremberg Code. And that every country that's a signatory to the UN Charter is bound to that. And the American Frontline Doctors website makes it easy to do it. They've got all the templates put together. I mean, folks just have to put in a little effort. But the real important thing is they need to rouse their fighting spirit. Because we're in a fight. We're in a war. And patriots need to get more aggressive. They need to let them know that they're being complicit with war crimes and not mince words. Let them know how serious this is. Because the companies that try to fight you will lose in the end. But you've got to be willing to fight. Now, the real reason for these mask mandates all of a sudden returning because of this new Delta variant is because the cabal is gearing up for riots in the wake of the audit results. And they want people's faces covered. Just like they were covered last summer when they were out there burning down cities. And they want people at home in a deep state of fear, just like last summer. They want to recreate. Last summer was just a warm-up. This is the real deal, because they know that this information is coming out. And it's all part of the same agenda. It's all the same people. They know what's coming, and they're preparing their ground forces, BLM, Antifa, and so forth, to attempt to create so much havoc that the country falls into civil war and is ripped apart before we have a chance to unify against them and discover the truth. But it's not going to work. This was the deep state plan. This was what was in store for us. They were going to put us in camps, using our refusal to accept the thing that goes in your arm as a justification for that. And we're seeing this unfold to shake people out of their apathy. But the election system, the entire establishment, the entire deep state is going to be exposed by themselves. Really, they're exposing themselves. And that's the brilliance of the white hat plan, is they outsmarted and outmaneuvered the cabal and had them basically destroy themselves. Trump and the alliance are sitting back and allowing the American people to witness the self-destruction of the establishment and their uncloaking of their true identity. They're showing people who they really are. And they're using this variant to ramp up the fear again. And of course, they're using fake statistics. They're using manipulation of old data to craft yet another deception. And I believe for a while now that COVID is being used really by both sides for tactical reasons. And there's a deep connection between the pandemic and the election of 2020. But that's a topic for another show. Now, as the scientific forensic audit results loom, what we're witnessing is a full court press to get every major city primed for violence all over again. And the timing couldn't be more perfect. Because again, the cabal always uses different variations of the same playbook, but the main objective is to cause enough chaos to deflect attention away from them to prevent the unification of the people. Because the deep state, they know the storm that's coming. And that's why they're making preparations for what's coming. And if you understand the real paradigm, then you can understand what you're seeing on mainstream media. You can understand what's unfolding. Know the destination, and you'll understand the journey, as the great David Icke says. I mean, Trump has countered them brilliantly at every turn. He countered their attempt to keep us locked down for years using Operation Warp Speed. And of course, they had to, because of Trump's counter moves, they had to then accelerate even more and make their agenda even more obvious. And I've maintained my contention that this is all a scripted movie and that most of the cabal has been decimated, although it certainly doesn't appear on the surface to be the case. But I do believe that the military has drastically reduced the capacity of the cabal to operate. But that's not to suggest that the fight against them is over or that they don't have any teeth, as Gene said. They still do. They're very resource oriented, as he pointed out. And again, they've been in control for thousands and thousands of years. So, of course, they still have a whole bunch of resources, i.e., weapons, at their disposal that need to be taken seriously. And their major weapon, or one of their major weapons, is the control of the narrative for the ignorant public. And of course, beneath the surface, their most formative weapon, as Gene talked about, is being targeted by the you-know-what to eliminate this Mark Ultra army that's activated by Janus, etc., that is targeting the mankind DNA. And if you don't know what I'm referring to, go back and listen to Gene and I's interviews, and you'll understand. I think it was our second interview where he really broke this for the first time. At least I think it was the first time he had ever really discussed it. And I think he verified that actually the last time we spoke. It was the first time he had ever really revealed what was really going on with the thing that goes in your arm. So if you don't really understand or know what I'm talking about, go back and listen to the second interview and my subsequent analysis of it as well. And this is why I love Gene Decode, for one of the many reasons. I mean, his insight is so valuable because without this explanation of the real tactics, at least for me, very little of Trump's moves would really make sense. In fact, the only way his actions would make sense is if what Gene is saying is true, and I believe that to be the case. And I've made it clear that I don't think that there's any way that Trump got duped here. I mean, on the surface, he pushed the jab to counter the lockdowns, as I pointed out a minute ago, which had they gone through the way the cabal, had they been implemented and upheld for as long as the cabal wanted to, millions of people would have died. Billions even. And of course, that was the plan. So, of course, he had to push Operation Lock Speed to avoid all that, because these lockdowns would have killed most of the world population anyway. And, of course, in order to avoid immediate forced vaccinations, Trump pushed these through to get emergency authorization use, knowing that that would then give the people out there who are awake a choice. And it's a difficult decision, as we've talked about. But people need to understand, and they need to remember that, once again, like I said, we're at war. And that all options for preventing the complete destruction of humanity had to be on the table. And that includes the deception of the general public, even the patriots, in order to mitigate weapons of mass destruction, or to keep them from going off in the first place. And of course, the weapons we're talking about here would be the sleeping army, the millions of Mark Ultras out there, who at any moment could be triggered and cause the world to just go up in flames within a few hours. And so, of course, they needed to take drastic measures to counter this threat. And then, of course, on the subject of the PCR test, we're hearing that the WHO and the CDC, of course, they're now saying that, that test is not effective because it really can't tell the difference between COVID and the flu virus. And of course, so this PCR test is being replaced in December by another test that's owned by Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. I mean, you just couldn't make this stuff up. And the fact that there are still so many people that can't see that these monsters are profiting from the diseases that they create is just astounding to me. Even though I understand the reasons for it, it still blows my mind. But people are recognizing it, in record numbers. In record numbers. And they know, for example, that ivermectin is a really safe and effective drug. And even the Wall Street Journal is questioning the FDA, admitting that ivermectin is being attacked unfairly by the FDA. And of course, the reason is that emergency authorization use can only be authorized if there's really no other known cure, which HCQ and ivermectin are known cures. So the cabal has no choice but to promote their agenda by attacking the truth, as they always do. But the reality of this evil plot is already rearing its ugly head. I was listening to Charlie Ward and Mel K, their most recent discussion, and he said, I haven't verified this yet, but he said that to date, over 1 million people have died from taking it. Now, the other couple of days ago, I reported, I think it was 150K I'd heard. Now I'm hearing up to over 1 million. And that just proves that this depopulation agenda is no joke. This is very real. People are dying, folks. And this is only the beginning. Just wait to see how bad it gets over the next several months. And yet, despite that, you've got a president, Donald Trump, who every time he's appearing publicly now, he's appearing more and more confident. His body language is really exuding this sense of being in complete control. And rumor has it that Trump has been having frequent meetings with the members of his cabinet. And rumor also has it that Arizona has finished the audit, with the Senate Republicans leading the way, and that the results will be coming out very, very soon. I mean, literally, folks, it could be any moment now. Are they still blocking things and so forth? Yes, but they know they've basically come to a conclusion. And of course, we're hearing more and more about how Georgia, things are even more wild and crazy there. And the evidence of just outright fraud and criminality is emerging more and more every single day. And people understand that their voice was stolen at every single level, not just at the presidency level, but every level at the ballot box, every level of elected office. This has been going on for decades. And people are beginning to understand that their vote is not their own. And it hasn't been their own. And that Dominion and Smartmatic have been choosing their leaders. They've been choosing their leaders, not our leaders. We've never really had a choice, folks. And eventually, I mean, and I've heard more people than Charlie Ward say this, that Trump actually won every state. And we'll find out, but it wouldn't surprise me. More and more truth is coming out. Gaddafi's son was said to be killed by the deep state. Turns out he's alive and helping run the country. Amnesty International comes out with a report saying that America is really not a racist country. It's one of the least racist countries in the world. And the UN is saying our society is so racist that it needs investigation and intervention. People are seeing this. You've got Germany and Mexico beginning to publicly question the narrative of COVID. You've got people, again, as I mentioned before, the PCR test, realizing that the test can't actually isolate the virus because it's not really a virus. It's actually bioweapon souped up version of the flu, or at least that's my understanding. So you got the CDC, they're saying they want us to mask up again. They're saying it's time to start imposing jab mandates, imposing requirements to be jabbed. You got the DOJ laying the legal groundwork, or at least trying to, by saying it's legal, despite it being a war crime, like I pointed out. I even posted on my Telegram a document from the CDC website talking about putting unvaxxed people and quote unquote high risk people in camps. Literally, that's the word that they use. I mean, this is their final assault, folks. Or should I say, the simulation of their final assault by the alliance to bring us to that near death experience. And you've got Hollywood continuing to implode. You got the MSM continuing to lose control of their narrative. You've got big tech continuing to expose their hostility towards we the people and using our tax dollar funded technology against us to silence our free speech, to curtail our rights. And they're moving at warp speed, trying to do every single thing that they can at the highest levels to prevent the truth from coming out, even though they know ultimately the only thing that they can do is delay it. Because it's only going to be a matter of days, weeks, at this point, perhaps weeks, but I doubt it, before we get the Ghislane Maxwell case that will blow the entire operation of human trafficking wide open. And of course, expose the Satanism of the cabal as well. Everybody knows that any moment now, this whole thing could kick off. Anyone that's in the know, I should say. And you know, real patriots, and I'm talking to my audience, we'd rather die than watch human trafficking continue on our watch. We'd rather die than let freedom die on our watch. We're willing to go all the way because we trust God completely. Or if we don't, we're at least working on the ability to trust God completely, to get closer to our Creator. But I'm telling you, when people realize that taxpayer money is literally being used to finance child trafficking all over the world, and especially at the southern border, on an industrial scale, hardcore pedophilia, devil worship, child sacrifice, the A drug, I mean, this world is going to explode in anger. The public demands for justice are going to be unlike anything that we have ever witnessed in history. And the military tribunals will be released to the public. I genuinely think that that's coming sooner rather than later. We're going to find out about these tribunals that we've been hearing about. But it's quite likely that the big tech companies will impose the comms blackout that we're expecting on themselves, rather than the white hats, and try to blame it on some sort of false flag. It is likely that, at least on the surface, this could happen. That it would look like big tech was refusing to cover this information, imposing this blackout on itself. But really, ultimately, as I pointed out time and time again, it's really the white hats behind the scenes pulling all the strings. But this week, I think, the more I'm hearing, this week and next week are going to be really, really, really critical for alliance moves. And I've also heard that a lot of the QFS final touches are being implemented, that the revaluation of currency is ongoing, because rather than take all of this wealth that was found during all these raids of the dumbs and just dropping it all in at once and refinancing evil, the white hats are dripping the money in very, very slowly to root out any further corruption so that they don't refinance evil. It was Charlie Ward who talked about that, and that really makes perfect sense. And of course, our great president continuing to drop those truth bombs. Maybe 2021, Somebody said Trump 2024, and he kind of shrugged and said, maybe 2021. I don't know. And someone else said, I think it was, we want you back, or something along those lines. And Trump said, you're going to be very happy. I forgot exactly what the context was, but he's making more and more statements that are making it very, very clear where this is headed. And like I said, his body language is exuding supreme confidence. And it seems like Trump is kind of at the point now where he's getting ready to really, for real big moves to be made, that he's kind of done with playing the game that he's been playing in the aftermath of this election fraud. And of course, we've got uprisings all over the world that have kind of bolstered Trump's enthusiasm. But he really does exude that he is still president through every pore at this point when you watch him and you listen to him. And in my view, he's more presidential now than he's ever been. The storm is near. Now is the time to trust God, to work on your relationship with him like never before. Because the window is closing. The window of opportunity to get close to God before this Red Sea moment where the wheat will be separated from the chaff. Now, that window is closing very rapidly. Understand that history has called upon us to save this world from tyranny. And we, the people, are the light. And we must begin to spread our light around the world like never before. And we are. This is God's moment. And we chose to be of service. Never forget that. And take comfort in knowing that God is the supreme authority and is in complete control. Now we have to wait for him to move on the enemy. But the hour draws close. Pray, my fellow patriots. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this analysis. Please let me know in the comments or on Telegram. If you haven't joined my Telegram already, please do. Please hit the like button and subscribe. Please do everything that you can to support the channel by sharing it with like-minded people. And I will be back soon with another report, God willing. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. Have a great night. Patriot out.